James Black, his father's worst enemy, clips his safety harness to deadman bolts and steps onto the 1,000-kilogram weight. Behind him, a flywheel the diameter of a city bus is spinning. It looms over him, a blur of motion holding vast amounts of kinetic energy. A chill breeze wafts over him, hinting at how fast the massive wheel spins on the frictionless magnetic bearings. James set his work boots more securely, readies his stance, and grabs on the steel cable that holds the weight. He takes a breath and nods to Fritz that he's ready to fly. Fritz gives him a devil mischievous look and shouts, "Have a nice trip," and yanks a connection lever. Kinetic power from the flywheel feeds into the gears, feeds into the winches, feeds into the steel cable holding James's weight. With crushing G's, James surges skyward. Riding the weight, he shoots up out of the Willis Tower sub-basement and up through the open gap in the pavement. Cold wind air engulfs him. Electromagnetics kicks in, pushing him faster and higher. Icy wind makes his eyes tear. He's speeding up the face of Willis Tower, whipping past other suspended weights in their columns, his cheeks tugging at the G's, his exposed skin freezing. He keeps rising. He escapes the shadow canyons of downtown Chicago and rises into bright winter sunshine. A snow-mantled city sprawls below him. The weight suddenly slows. For a moment, he's weightless, as if he's launching into open air and about to fly. The weight comes to a stop. Standing atop the weight, James hangs suspended above the city, exposed to sun and sky and the bracing winds racing off Lake Michigan. Out on the lake, the waters are frozen, the lakefront ice-rimmed. Wind turbines rise from the lake's smooth, snowy surface like white Arctic flowers, scattered all the way to the horizon. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere, where we talk about climate change and the clean energy transition. Normally this channel is very focused on fact-based information, mainly the news surrounding these important issues. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell so you can stay updated on these topics. But in order to change our trajectory, it can be helpful to dream of how the world could be different. That's where fiction, art, and storytelling come in. I mean, climate change is happening now, as anyone in the range of the current Canada wildfires and smoke might tell you, but it can still be hard for a lot of people to grasp how it will impact them in the future. Moreover, solutions like changing how we create food and energy and potentially even laws is something that can be difficult for us to wrap our heads around. This issue has spawned the development of a new fiction genre called cli-fi. Yes, that's a real term. And I'm not the first person on YouTube to cover it. Fiction allows for people to suspend their disbelief as they enter into an alternative reality. Right now, we often see cli-fi in the form of apocalyptic visions from movies like Don't Look Up, scenes from the TV show Loki, and books like Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake. But authors like Kim Stanley Robinson and Denise Baden show there could be more positive or subtle spins on this genre. I got the opportunity to speak with Denise about effective climate change storytelling and some recent storytelling competitions she's leading through her Green Stories initiative that is part of the University of Southampton in the UK. Denise is a professor of sustainable business there. The competition started back in 2018 and is sponsored by a variety of organizations and businesses to encourage people to think out of the box when it comes to discussing climate change and environmental issues and solutions. So I don't bury the lead, there are 2 writing competitions with deadlines coming up that my creative writers should be aware of. The first is the Novel Prize, due June 23rd, and the second is the Short Story Competition, Microbe Edition, due September 23rd. I have the links below for all this information in the description, as well as timestamps as we go through this interview so you can learn more straight from the organizer herself. Please share this video with your creative writing friends for some fun submissions. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Denise. Thank you for reaching out to me.
No, well, it's really good. You know, you're sort of reaching different people than I'm reaching.
Hmm.
So, with the message, because we've got to do what we can.
Exactly. Anything helps, right? Tell me about yourself. How did you get interested in this particular field?
Okay, so my background, I did a degree in politics and economics, and then I went out and worked in the world, all kinds of businesses. And then I came back to do a PhD in psychology. And then I ended up, I don't know how, working in the field of sustainable business and corporate social responsibility and business ethics. And I got kind of, I think as a lot of us do who end up working in that field, worried, I guess, that so much needed to be done. The solutions were all there, but we just weren't adopting them. And I started thinking, well, what would it take to get from where we are now to this sort of positive version of sustainable society we'd all like to live in? And I thought, well, that's not the kind of thing it's quite easy to talk about necessarily in the political sphere, because these ideas don't fit in a soundbite. It's academic articles, which I've written plenty of, get such limited viewing, and you're just talking in your own echo chamber. So I decided to set up the Green Stories Project. So I thought fiction, you can kind of just like create new worlds, and what better space to start imagining what a new future might look like. So I set up the Green Stories Project, and it's a series of free writing competitions. And the idea is that we encourage positive visions, climate solutions, of what a sustainable society might look like. Or it could just be a mainstream genre like a romance or a thriller, but with green solutions smuggled in. So we've been running them. We've done 17 competitions. We've got one coming up end of June, a novel prize with $1,200 first prize, $600 second prize. So not to be sniffed at.
Yeah, no kidding.
And we have short story competitions coming up. We were just going to rely on sponsors. So when we get sponsorship, we do another competition. And every time I think it's running out, we get more sponsors. So, like I said,
That's
it
great.
seems to be going well.
Give me an example of how you use fiction to talk about climate change as an issue. And do those green stories primarily focus on solutions, or what are some of the trends you're seeing from those submissions?
Okay, so a lot of people talked about the problems. So, and that wasn't what we wanted, because as a psychologist, I know that when you generate fear, doesn't necessarily lead to the kind of responses you want. So you might write this climate dystopia, and what you're hoping is the reader or the viewer will think, oh, these terrible things will happen if we don't do something. Therefore, I will give up eating beef, I'll stop flying, I'll write to
Right.
my politicians. But actually, they're much more likely to start, prepper responses, buying up all the stuff, anti-immigration, very self-protective. It's a natural thing to want to do to kind of scare people into action. But in fact, I've done a lot of research, and it clearly shows that showing solutions or positive role models is actually much more effective in inspiring the kind of behavior change you want.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a problem. So I ended up looking for fiction that did this and not finding any. So I wrote a book myself called Habitat Man, based on a real life green garden consultant. He gave up his job in the city to help make gardens wildlife friendly. And he said, I can help you. I've done a water butter pond, native plants, pollinator friendly plants, but I can only do a few gardens. I want to do the world. And I thought, well, a book can reach a lot. So I, added a body in the garden to make a bit of a cozy mystery. He fell in love. So it's a kind of eco-themed rom-com with a hint of cozy mystery. And it's really about what you can do in your own back garden and your own practices.
She looked me up and down, her eyes glinting for a second. Then she beckoned me in. I smiled nervously and followed her into the house. I'd always associated Highfield with academic types, and the very proper ladies from the Highfield Women's Institute. They certainly wouldn't answer the door wearing pyjamas. "What would you like me to do?" I asked once the kettle was on. "I'm looking for a compassionate way to get rid of rodents. I try to preserve wildlife and habitats. I'm more about how to get animals into your garden, even rats. No, rats are social and intelligent creatures, but they can easily take over. I thought I had mice, so I tried to trap them with this. She showed me a small plastic bottle with a tiny toy plastic ladder stuck to the side and a lump of cheese in the bottom. But it turned out to be rats. I jumped when she pulled a huge dead rat out of a bag by its tail. I called the rat man, but he just took the mick and wanted to poison them. I stifled a smile. The rat was many times larger than the bottle. She dropped the rat back in the bag and handed me a mug of hot tea. I took it gratefully, glad of a chance to gather my thoughts after the misunderstanding. What would you like to see in your garden? Hedgehogs, perhaps? I haven't seen them for ages. Wonderful, we can try. I stood up, tea in hand. Shall we have a look? Dawn swapped her fluffy slippers for Wellingtons and led me outside.
And we've done some research, and it shows it really has led to changes in behaviour. The natural burial scene inspired lots of people to say they changed their will to have a natural burial. Because of course you don't want to be putting hard wood in the ground. I mean, we all think, oh, deforestation is so terrible, but we don't necessarily connect it to the fact we're using hardwood coffins or eating beef or, you don't want to be filling lots of chemicals in the earth either. So we talked about that. But also some of our other winners of the competitions sort of had really lovely ideas. One of my favourites was a guy who wrote this story about a man who wakes up and it's 2064 and he's been frozen, cryogenically frozen. So there's the hook,
Right.
Why was I frozen? He can't remember why, but his children are now older than him. His wife's in a care home.
Wow.
So he's got all these dramatic things going on in his personal life, which makes a great story, but it's also a nice opportunity. So in this world, you have different kinds of systems. So yes, it's renewable energy, it's on-demand public transport. We have, citizens' assemblies to make decisions because, our representative democracy tied by 4 or 5 year electoral cycles is never going to prioritize, the existential threat of climate over short-term goals. I mean, we know that, we can see that, even without all the vested interests. So this one imagines, different political systems that give rise to different decisions. And these happen at the moment. Citizens' assemblies, citizens' juries are a big thing. But quite often they don't have actual power. They only have power to recommend. So that's a real systemic solution. You could include things like personal carbon trading. So just as in emergencies like war, we ration things. Here, carbon is rationed. So everyone has their own personal carbon allowance. If they go under, they can sell their carbon credits and get lots of money. If they go over, they have to buy it. And so all the innovation is now harnessed towards green practices, green technologies. People's consumption is harnessed towards that. So it's a lovely way of demonstrating the kinds of policies that we might not be ready for now, but we certainly need to start being aware of. Because one day I'm scared enough to think, actually, we really need something like that. So it's a lovely way to show, how we might have got to a society that is still functioning very well in 2024, but in the context of a really dramatic plot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like fiction allows for people to suspend their disbelief and their doubts about certain systems or certain solutions to just fully immerse themselves in it because they have to for the world of the character. And so that kind of allows them to open their minds a little bit without even realizing it sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, they call that narrative transportation, where you just the characters' values become your own for a while.
Interesting.
And I think it's the same with TV and with film characters and so on. And there's quite a lot of work that we're doing with the Green Stories Project to try and raise awareness of the very subtle impact that, fictional characters' behavior can have on ours. For example, we were doing a Instagram and Twitter campaign, hashtag climate characters, hashtag hot or not. And we compared James Bond. He's got his single-use sports car, Aston Martins, his walking wardrobe of luxury suits. And, if we all lived like that, we'd need 20 planets, But you got Jack Reacher, who shops in thrift shops, who travels by bus. He only needs one planet's worth of resources to kill the bad guys. And we're kind of playing off all these characters like Emily in Paris, who needs a Paris Agreement just to keep her wardrobe going. Versus Frankie from Grace and Frankie. So yeah, we're trying to do that just to raise awareness. Is it still okay to be portraying high consumption lifestyles as aspirational?
Do you think that you're starting to see some more climate change integration into plots than maybe used to be? I'm thinking maybe TV shows, because I feel like I'm starting to see more integration, even with things like Loki from Marvel. I feel like they briefly talked about climate change when they were going through the multiverse. Peripheral was another TV show I was watching, and one of the ways that there was a bit of an apocalyptic future was due to climate change, but then they had these gigantic carbon capture systems that were attached to buildings. But they're still kind of bleak. Those examples were still kind of bleak, but I still was seeing things crop up. And then, of course, the more obvious examples like Don't Look Up is obviously like a very clear, relating to climate change kind of story, right? But are you seeing any other examples, or maybe even books that are starting to crop up more often?
Yeah, there are. But like you say, there's always a tendency to go dystopian. Yeah. I think the idea is it just makes better drama. And I think then you think you're dealing with a problem, but you could be making it worse, by bigging up the fear. So I do worry about that. But there's a Hollywood Climate Summit coming up. And there are competitions now where they really are looking for scripts that integrate climate solutions, not just raise awareness of the climate crisis. So things are happening in that sphere. We should expect to see more.
Gotcha. So tell me a little more about the competitions coming up. What kind of submissions are you looking for? Is it just UK based, or can it be people that are international? Who are you looking for those submissions, and what exactly is like the theme of the different contests?
So the novel competition, like I said, we asked for 3 chapters and a synopsis. And if we like them, sometimes we go back to the finalists to say, can we see a few more chapters to help us decide? So the book doesn't have to be, we'd want it to be kind of first draft complete, perhaps, but it doesn't have to be absolutely polished, ready to go. And anything really, as long as it's in English. So it's open to anyone. We're not looking for children's books, mainly because they tend to have lots of illustrations and so on. So young adult is fine. And a key point is, and this is where lots of people go wrong, we don't just want the problem. So, for example, we tend to get lots of entries where, the hero or heroine gives up their job and rushes over to Indonesia to confront evil rainforest loggers.
Right.
And it's, 1, they're not evil, it's a systemic problem. 2, your reader is not going to be able to do that. So we'd much rather you had maybe a standard romance, but instead of buying their clothes with that standard shopping trope of, going around all the shops, buying everything, maybe they could get them from a thrift shop or secondhand or fashion swap or pre-used, pre-loved, vintage fashion, when they're going out to eat. It doesn't always have to be beef burgers. So you can just much more subtly, and like I said, with the Habitat Man, we had the natural burial scene, which was really quite inspirational from what the feedback was. So you can be much more subtle about it, I think. It's just showcase people making more sustainable decisions. So it could be a thriller, but perhaps they're paying by a carbon credit card. Or, just nice ways. There's loads of green alternatives out there. But if they're always presented as niche or alternative, then it's not necessarily going to get people on board. And And this is where I guess my psychology background has informed the competition, because when we look at what affects behavior, there's the theory of planned behavior, and our behavior is a result of our attitudes and beliefs, social norms, what everyone's doing, and a feeling of agency, or feeling of, can we do this? So say recycling, do we have a positive belief or attitude towards it? Will we be disapproved of if we don't recycle? That's the social norms. And is there a recycling bin nearby? And that's the strongest factor. So pretty well all climate and stories and everything focuses on changing attitudes. All the research shows that attitudes are the weakest part of that. We constantly have positive attitudes towards things, or negative attitudes towards things, but still do them because everyone else does. Or it's just hard not to, so the point is focus on just normalizing, climate-friendly behaviors. For example, there's loads of apps where you can share your car. If you've got a car, you can rent it out to other people, make a ton of money, and they don't have to buy a car, for example. So perhaps your hero or heroine could be part of a drive share or car share system. So just in these everyday things, we'd be happy to have stories that were genre fiction, because you don't always want to be preaching to the converted. You want to be getting outside that echo chamber, outside that bubble. So if you write a standard romance or thriller and you just show these green behaviors as the norm, that's subtle but incredibly powerful, I think. Mm-hmm. So not every story has to sort of be openly about climate or environmental issues. Some can be, as long as they show solutions, but others can just be much more subtle about it, and we'll love to have those.
Cool. And then you said that there was also a short story competition coming up as well. Oh, and it's a June deadline. Is that like by the end point that people can submit? Or
yeah,
is that the beginning point?
No, it's the 26th of June. Okay. Is the deadline for that. Short stories. It's a little bit technical about microbes and how they can help us clean up waste and pollution and home composting. But the thing is to keep an eye on the website. It's greenstories.org.uk, and there's regular competitions coming up. And we try and publish them if we can. Or, if anyone's got a traditional publisher, great, or mentor towards independent publishing, because I think that's actually, I think it's taking over a bit from traditional publishing as the way to go for many authors. We've got some other projects happening as well, so it's not just about the competitions. So last year we wrote, I edited a book where we got experienced writers, like, do you know Kim Stanley Robinson, who did Ministry of the Future? Yeah, Stan, as I'm proud to call him. He got involved. Paolo Bacigalupi does great speculative fiction. So we got experienced writers working with climate experts, and we compiled 24 short stories, each with climate solutions at their heart. And we got it in front of COP27 in Egypt. And it's already led to real sort of ideas and planting seeds of change. So some of them are kind of nature-based, like seaweed, kelp, planting seagrass, because we always focus on trees, but actually there's a lot more you can do with the ocean. We had some which were more technical. There's a couple which explored the idea of giving nation status to the ocean, because giving legal status to nature has proved to be really effective. And the World Ocean Summit is something that they might get on their agenda now, to have a look at what they can do along that line. And I wrote a much more systemic one. So for me, I'm more interested in society. So for me, things like going away from the gross domestic product as a measure of success to a well-being index is crucial. I really like the idea of things like citizens' juries, personal carbon allowances, the sharing economy. So, why buy everything new if you can just borrow it?
Exactly.
So I explore some of these ideas in a whodunit called The Assassin, where it's 8 people in a citizens' jury, and they meet to explore climate solutions. But there's a murderer in the midst. So it's a kind of standard whodunit. And that's now being adapted as a play, Murder in the Citizens' Jury.
That's cool.
It's fun, and we're engaging. We want to engage the audience so they feel like they're helping to choose the climate solution, and they are part of that citizens jury. So we've got the first draft done. I'm just now looking for theatre companies to do read-throughs and help develop it. So if there's any of your listeners or your viewers out there who like a bit of theatre, do get in touch. Because it's nice to see it. I'm not going to be charging royalties for it. All of this is just, have it, run with it, let me know how it goes. That would be such fun. But they think they might, I've had a word that they'll probably put it on at COP28 if we can get it ready in time. So, yeah.
That'd be cool. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Because I think, if you want to talk about personal carbon allowances or, sharing economy or all these things, it's quite hard to take it all in. But you remember information in a story so much better than you do than, say, reading a dry report where the characters are interacting, they're bringing their own lives to the ideas and so on. So, yeah.
That's great. That sounds like a lot of really cool projects in the works, and infiltrating different spaces beyond the page is pretty cool too. Yeah. What gives you hope about this climate issue?
Important question. Yeah, I think sometimes I look back and I think of when big changes have happened before. So it is easy to think, oh, will we ever move fast enough? But then if you look back, say, at slavery, concern built about that for centuries, but then it, they got rid of it. We were worried about, ill health and inequality in the UK for centuries. And then when the National Health Service came in, things changed within a few years. If you look at the Soviet Union, you had glasnost and perestroika at the end of the 80s. Suddenly, in the space of a few months, an entire system changed course. Cuban Revolution, there are moments in time where everything can change very, very rapidly when you've had enough seeds planted and there's enough momentum for change. And this is the first generation ever facing this existential threat. And I know so many business leaders want to make a difference, but are feeling so caught up in the system, they don't know how. Politicians are behind. We spend so much time thinking, oh, what if we vote for them? It will be better than if we vote for them. But I don't think any politician can make the changes we need. I think we need to do it ourselves in our own communities. And I'm seeing more and more people doing that. Not necessarily, for green reasons, but it just feels so much safer to have home energy, or, to have your own food or your own solar panel as a backup.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, so I do think that there is change afoot. I think everyone wants change. Certainly, I might be different. Certainly in the UK, I'm definitely getting the sense there's a real swell of opinion that the politicians are oblivious to, but I see it on the ground of people wanting change. And this is, I think, again, citizens' assemblies was something I got really excited about a few years back. And suddenly more people are excited about it. And that's really nice because that's a systemic change. Who's making decisions on whose behalf and how is key, absolutely key, I think, to making the kinds of decisions that will save us. So for me, that's my biggest hope. I think maybe looking at upgrading our democracy so it's fit for the 21st century, and perhaps upgrading some of our economic models, switching away, to more well-being index. And, countries are beginning to do that now. And if we see how it's working, like in New Zealand, they're doing it, see how it's working there, then perhaps, we can be persuaded. And then the conversation changes. So, economic growth, there's a big overlap with well-being, but they're not the same thing. And if we can start changing the conversation away from what's good for the economy to what's good for us, I think we're in a whole different space then. So yeah I stay hopeful. Well, what about you? What gives you hope, Becky?
Honestly, it's having these kind of conversations. It's having the people in the Beckosphere who really care about the topic, and even seeing changes within my own family members just from me talking about it shows how powerful it is to just have more conversations in general, and how just a teensy bit from that can make a big difference. And then also just the policy changes over the years that have been spurred out by increased activism and concern for the issue. I mean, we've seen, even though it feels like nothing happens during these COP events, we've still seen pretty drastic changes with the European Union and how they're like working on different carbon markets, and
that's very exciting.
California's different like electric vehicle standards and all that kind of stuff. Like those things would have been beyond a lot of people's imagination just 5 years ago. So that gives me some hope too. Yeah.
Excellent.
Is there anything else that you would like to say before we go?
Okay, well, I guess I always like to think anything to do with the climate has to have a call to action. Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed. So do check out the greenstories.org.uk website for all the competitions. And it's also got lots of solutions on there. So the anthology we did for COP27, that's where all the solutions are on there. So if you just want to find out more, even if you're not into writing, it's there. It's got all the Green Stories publications there as well. So books we've published as a result of that. We talk about the Climate Characters project. So if you like your social media, check out #ClimateCharacters and #HotOrNot. And we tie it to a little survey because we want to get a sense of where people are at. You know, what do they think? So do get involved in that. And any theatre companies who would like to put on Murder in a Citizen's Jury, just get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. I'm like definitely open source on that one.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with me about your projects. And I hope that it does inspire some Becksperians to get involved in the competition and in more of the climate fiction side of things.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for having me on, Becky, and keep up the good work. What you're doing is great.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Denise, for talking with me about this important form of storytelling. I look forward to seeing the competition submissions. Remember, all the important links about Denise and the competitions will be in the description below. Please let me know if any of you are planning on submitting a piece. What are your favorite examples of cli-fi? Give me some recommendations. Also, let me know what you thought of this conversation and Denise's research on effective climate change messaging. Does fear or solutions work better for you? Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news organizations.
Thank you so much to the people on Patreon who help support me and my fur baby Rue. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Norman Anal, Greg H., Paul B., Phil Plasma, Dan Morton, Nate, Specker, Bree C., climate teacher John J., Deanne, Steve, Kevin Morton, and SKP Joe Korsgold. I greatly appreciate your support of $5 or more. If you would like to support the Beckosphere, please check out the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments.
Bye for now.